Okay, so let's try this again. Alright, well, once again, sorry about the delay we've had on getting the vids out there. Quick recap here. On the Patreon, we only have a 200 megabyte, that's megabyte, upload maximum, so we're limited on what we can upload. The camera we were using before only had the high def setting, so we could only get maybe 45 seconds, and we were over our limit. So I ended up ordering a different cell phone. And by the way, if you see any smoke in the video here, it's like 33 degrees out here, just above freezing, and that's my breath, so I don't think anything of it. But I bought a new camera phone, thinking that would solve the problem. The problem was that phone only had the high definition setting and a MMS or text message setting, which was way too low. It wasn't even a VGA, so that didn't work. So then I had to turn around and order another camera phone, which is what we're on now. So it does have an intermediate setting, which should get us below the maximum threshold and hopefully have a somewhat acceptable video quality. If y'all don't care, let me know how the vid quality is on this showing up on your end. That way I know if this is going to work or not. And I guess we'll just take it one thing at a time. So, a sip of cold coffee and let's get into this. This is the big one that we had. Excuse me. The request for the 38Super bullet weights and why we're using them. So, just a quick rundown on the 38 Supers. As most of y'all know, a standard load for a 38 Super is generally a 130 grain bullet, anywhere from 1250 to 1350 feet per second. A little stiffer than a 9mm. Have to remember the 38 Super was introduced in 1929, so back then this was a hot rod round. You also have to remember the 38 ACP and 38 Super is the exact same case. Some manufacturers did beef up the web in the cases just a little bit, but basically it's the exact same case dimensions, exact same cases. A 38 Super is simply just a plus P 38 ACP. Make sure you do not put a 38 Super in a 38 ACP pistol. We all know what that's going to end up entailing: spontaneous disassembly. Being that the 38 Super was introduced in 1929, there's been a lot of load developments. Basically, probably the biggest popularity that the Super has enjoyed has been since the 70s. Basically, it was in the 70s into the 80s. Of course, that was before the advent of all the new cartridges. First thing that comes to mind would be the 357 SIG. 357 SIG outpaces the 38 Super in the upper ends, but ballistically, it's a real pretty well close combination of the cartridges. To get back to the Super, and we'll just kind of stick with that. However, I will be interjecting a little bit of 9mm here. But what people were wondering was why I am loading 95 grain bullets in a 38 Super. Two reasons. One, they're really fun. And the main thing was I'm lazy. So to get to, I guess, kind of the laziness, and it really didn't start out as lazy, it just ended up becoming a lazy thing. Being that the 380, 9mm, 38 Super, they're all 355, 356 bullets. Excuse me again. When I was loading for the 9mm, now back when I had my 9mm, my Beretta 92 FS. I did have the molds. This was way before the advent of tumble lube, but I ran a 115 grain round nose, basically the same thing as ball, only in a lead, and that was my cheap plinking loads. So when I started loading for everybody else's 9mm, between the time I got rid of my Beretta and I started loading for everybody else, my 115 grain molds kind of got up and left me. So the only thing I could get in the tumble lube, because I have gotten spoiled on tumble lubes, as most of y'all know, if I'm not going to be shooting over, say, 1100, at most 1150 feet per second, generally I'll go with the tumble lube. It's so much easier, so much quicker. But at the time, the only mold that I could get in the tumble lube was the 124 grain, which is these right here. This is the 124 grain trunicated cone tumble lube bleed molds, 6 cavity molds. Basically, when I was loading 9mm, that was what I loaded for everybody in the 9mm. Most of the guns love them. They feed great. And as I say, this is not a semi-wad cutter per se, but this is their version of the trunicated cone. There is no shoulder here. And again, excuse the camera because we're trying to keep our resolution down and our focus is kind of going wonky. But anyhow, that is a trunicated cone by their definition. So just to give you a quick rundown on what we have here. This is the 95 grain round nose flat point. Now this is not a trunicated cone because it's slightly rounded along the edges here, but that is considered a round nose flat point, 95 grain, generally for a 380. This is the 95 grain tumble lube, which is what I was running in my 380s. I was molding up about, sorry I have to flip in front of the camera here occasionally because the light sensor flashes. Apologize for that. But I was molding up 400 to 500 of those at a time, and we were running a lot of 380s. We had plenty of bullets, had a shortage on cases, but we always had plenty of bullets. When we emptied the cases, we'd load them back up. We put a lot of them things down range. So what had kind of sort of happened was I was doing some experimenting with the loads, and we were doing just light plinking loads, and I had ran out of the 124 grains, but I had 400 of the 95 grains. So it was one of those have-to situations. This was on a Friday afternoon, and they needed some rounds for Saturday morning. I said, let me work up a load here. I'll give you some 95 grains since you're just going to be plinking with them. It's not like you're going to be out, using them for anything special. I said, pretty holes in paper, tin cans. I said, they'll work. So we started working up loads for the 95 grainers. Well, a friend of mine, he had a high point, and I know before y'all started on the high point, but it's what he had. He wanted some ammo for it, so I loaded him up 2 boxes. This was in between the time I ran out of the 124s and the time I loaded up for him, which is about 2 weeks span. I had molded up more of the 124s. Well, we took him up to the range, tried him out, and the problem was, out of his high point, after 20, at most 25 yards, they were keyholing. That high point would not stabilize the heavier bullets. I said, okay. I said, let me try something. So I went back. I loaded up the same bullets that I was loading for his Burst of Thunder 380cc compact for practice, and loaded those up. Gun loved them. We were shooting 30, even out to 35 yards. Bullets weren't keyholing, bullets were stabilized. Nice pretty round hole, even at 30 and 35 yards. Yes, out of a $100 high point. So, next time we went to mold, instead of me molding up 124s for 9mm, 95s for 380s, I just simply molded up all 95 grains. We did, I think, around 750 in that batch. So, long story short on that, when my buddy Jimmy, who has the very, very rare SIG P220, and this is the European SIG, it does have the Hill mag release. Very few of these pistols were made, let alone very few of them ever made it to the U.S. However, he does have one of these SIG P220 and 38Super. So, just for, pardon my French here, shits and giggles, I loaded up the 95 grainers into 38Super. This was after I loaded up the 95 grainers in his 9mm. Originally we put 2 boxes of the 124s through his Ruger PC carbine. And shot great, shot beautiful, accurate as all get out. You know, we're dinging 6-inch plates at 100 yards. No muss, no fuss. So then 2 of Jimmy's 9mm pistols, we put another half a box. Well, we had 2 boxes, put a box and a half through the PC carbine. Put a half box through the pistols. And I was like, let's try some of these 95s in that thing. So I did. I loaded up the 95s. And after that, it just became a thing. So that's where it's kind of it started out on a let's do some experimenting. And then it got to be, well, I'm just lazy. So basically, to put that in a nutshell, instead of molding up these for 9mm and 38Super, and then molding these for 380s, basically I just mold all the 95s. So now I put the 95s, because remember, this isn't self-defense, this isn't hunting, this is just fun on the range. Tin cans, occasionally pretty holes and paper, mostly tin cans and steel plates. Just having fun plinking rounds. So we started working uploads for these. That way, I mold one bullet. One bullet covers the entire gamut. That's 380, 9mm, 38Super, and a few in between. Less inventory, less stuff to take or keep track of. It works. So that will get us into, after my little rant here, the actual 38Super bullets, velocities, and why we're doing what we're doing. So the nice thing about the 38Super, and this does roll over in 9 too, a lot of our loads for the 38Super and the 9 do cross over, because basically what we're doing, it's kind of like the difference in a 10 mil and a 40 Smith & Wesson. We're basically taking a 10 mil and putting 40 Smith & Wesson loads in it. Well, same thing with 38Super and 9mm. Even though we're using the longer, bigger cases for the bigger gun, we can still drop the loads down, and we have a lot of leeway. So, for example here, let me just run through here real quick and get this over with. Yeah, this is the 95 grain FMJ. Basically, it's a round, flat nose. Does have the exposed base. This we're getting into the total metal jacket. This is the 100 grain round nose in the ball. And of course we have the 115 XTP, 124 tumble lube. And these, I wish I'd have bought more. I found out these were a limited run. I only ordered 100 from Midway at the time. Had no idea who made the bullets. Finally discovered later on these were actually made for Midway. It was a limited edition run for Midway by Sierra. Hopefully I'll focus here. And this is a 124 grain hollow point. And the reason this candelure is here, which actually a buddy of mine kind of screwed up, because generally the candelure is your crimp groove. Not on this bullet. The candelure is simply to keep the jacket and the core bonded together. They still have to be loaded to standard overall length. This is not a crimp groove. This is simply to keep it bonded, because when this thing starts expanding out, it will expand out all the way back to the candelure. The candelure will stop the expansion, and this thing comes out about the size of a nickel. Anyway, this is the bullet that loaded in the 38 Super. Sorry, let me get the flashy off. This is what one of my buddies used this season and dropped a 75-pound dress weight. Not a big deer, but decent sized deer for here. But 75-pound dress weight doe with one shot from 40 yards. Deer went maybe 20 yards. 20 yards would be pushing it. You know, I'm figuring 16, 18, something like that. But we'll just call it 20 yards. One shot from the tree stand, 40 yards, and deer piled up after 20 yards. Nice, clean kill. So, those ended up being nice loads. That's also what he carries as a defense load. So back to the plethora of just basically playing around here. These are just basically the cheapest, easiest way we can get out. You get roughly, 72, 73 bullets to the pound. Yep, that's if you're running low on lead. Doesn't take a whole lot of lead to make up those bullets. So, it's a whole lot better than 124s. But they're just so much fun to play with. And there's such a big velocity swing. Now, what I was asked to and tell here is what kind of velocities are we getting and why are we running them at those velocities? Well, and okay, switch lights. When we first started playing with these in the 38 Super, as I said, I'd already been playing with them and loading them in the 9s just for fun, planking rounds, and pardon my French, but, you know, shits and giggles. When we started loading them in the 38 Super, it was kind of an extreme experiment. So I thought, well, let's see how they do. So when we first started out, we tried a few. We loaded up 10 rounds at basically about a full house load, which was right around 1440, 1450 feet per second. Bullets did good. They was accurate. Functioned fine. Fed great. Well, that experiment was over, so let's start dropping these things down since, you know, we're just going to be using them for plinking rounds. The load we end up settling on end up being around 1,350 feet per second. Now, when you look at somebody and say, I'm running a 38 Super and we're downloaded to 1,350 feet per second, they kind of look at you funny. But at 1,350 feet per second, we're getting excellent accuracy. This load actually, out of the guy that I originally started loading for, he had a Springfield 1911 and 1.5-inch groups at 25 yards was pretty much standard. Um, I call that acceptable accuracy in my book. Yeah, no problem with it. So getting into the plinking loads and start doling down. One thing I will say on this weight bullet, depending on what gun you're shooting. Now 1911s, we have taken that bullet and we have dropped it, and I always start. Remember, keep above minimum. Don't want a squib blow. Don't want a bullet stuck in the bore. But generally, if it will cycle the action, the bullet's going to come out the barrel. You're not going to have to worry about a squib load as long as it cycles the action. So what we do is basically start at a bare minimum given, then we'll start incrementally decreasing the powder until the gun quits cycling. So if I fire and it doesn't fully cycle the action, slide doesn't come fully to the rear, we're running too light of a load. We're getting in squib load territory. Start inching it back up. What we found on these in the 95 weight bullets is 1911s. We've not had a problem running those down to 1,000 feet per second. Now, the P220, you start getting down around a 1,050, and 1,075, she's getting a little sluggish. We won't run those less than 1,050. Not worried about getting a squib load in the barrel, because anything over 1,000 feet per second, muzzle velocity, it's still going to come out the bore. But it's not going to reliably cycle the action. So the P220, we keep them around 1,075. I have yet to see a 1911, whether the Springfields, any of the Colt models, none of the 1911s we've ever ran these through have had a problem cycling at 1,000 feet per second. Now you take 1,000 feet per second and a 95 grain bullet, it's basically about like shooting a 22. No recoil. Accuracy still good. I have found that the accuracy does start to drop off on these when you start dropping below, say, 1,050, 1,075, as far as, print and match groups. But if you're plinking, it's really not that much difference. I mean, you're talking about 25 yards, going from 1,075 to 1,000 feet per second. You're going from 1.25 to 2-inch groups. So, once again, it's what you plan on loading them for. As far as function, so here's one in the 38Super case. Have yet to find a gun that will not cycle these. We've ran them through several 1911s. Ran them through the 1 SIG. Pretty much everything that we put these through, they cycle beautifully. This bullet loaded in, actually I think I have one right here. Now here we go. Same bullet, loaded 9mm. We have put this through a plethora of 9mm. Rugers, even put it through a Canic. High points, 1911 9mm. Walthers, you name it. Smith & Wessons, Shields, and M&Ps. Never had a problem with it cycling. Basically, if it'll feed ball ammo, it'll feed these. So, anyhow, sorry, get the flashy off. Just a quick rundown on the plinking bullets and the loads and what velocities we're running. We will get in depth on this later, but like I said, I just wanted to put a quick one up since you guys were asking. But just for a fun little plinking load, these little 95 grainers in a 38Super 9mm, whatever you're running, they're awesome. So, recap here, just on our lead reloads. I'm not going to worry about the rest of them because y'all pretty much know what these are running. But this bullet right here, 1,000 feet per second in a 1911 up to 1450 is about where we cut them off at. It's a fun little bullet with a lot of velocity range. And for plinkers, it comes out great. A lot of versatility, great accuracy. The 124s, that's going to be in your basic standard range. Those we try to keep under 1,300 feet per second. They have a higher bearing surface for that particular bullet style, but we've ran them up to 1,350, haven't had any problems, but basically we're keeping these at about the 1,300 mark. A real nice load for that 124 is about 1,250. We get good accuracy. We're actually dropping 6-inch plates at 100 yards. It's got enough energy to take down a 6-inch standard dipstick plate at 100 yards. So but the biggest question was people wondering about the little 95 grainers, and how can you put a 95 grainer in a 38 Super? Well, right there's a 38 Super with a 95 grainer in it, and they are just loads of fun. Okay, well, let's see if this one goes through. As I said, we're just kind of running this as a test run on the new camera thingy, so we'll see if this goes through. And like I said, if you don't care, leave me a comment or shoot me a message or something. Let me know how this video is, and if this works out, then we're going to start running these pretty much on a daily basis.